We finished our introductory lecture. This lecture, I named it Reading in Your Classroom. Now, it's a pretty long lecture, so we will break it up. But we're going to talk about what it takes to teach a child to learn to read. All right? What is involved in reading? So, what's involved in reading? Roman numeral 1. That's my title. What is involved in reading? You think, oh, well, you just have to learn the letters. You just have to put those letters together. You got it. You're good. Well, there's a lot more involved. Right? Let's talk about. The first thing, actually, there's 7 things that I'm going to talk about that's involved in reading. The first thing is, I call it getting the tools. And I have tools in quotes. Getting the tools to learn to read. You have to give them something to work with. And you want to make sure that you have a very firm, strong foundation that you're laying, especially with reading. All right? So, something that I think about when I think about getting the tools to learn to read, I think this. This is one of the most important. Remember what I said to the asterisk? This is one of the most important things as a new teacher you can put in your mind and remember. Here it is. The initial learning is the most important. The initial learning is the most important. It's vital that you teach it correctly the first time. You can't get up in front of the children and say, okay, boys and girls, B says, duh. Oops. Okay, you need to make sure you know what you're doing. Okay? The second thing, teach it right the first time. Teach it right the first time. And then this thought goes right along with that. Once a child learns something, whether it's good or it's bad, it's in that memory bank. Okay, it sticks with them. Now, sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, that is not right. Listen up, class. Think about this. I said this, that's wrong. Here's what I want you to know. Okay, your smart kids are going to get that. But remember, in your classroom setting, you have very sharp kids, you have average kids, and you have very dull, hard to learn, okay? We want to pull all of those. We want to take those thick kids and pull them up to be average. We want to take those average kids and pull them up. Now, if I mess up, and every teacher's going to mess up, we do. If I mess up something and I say, oh, that was not right. All right, listen, I need to fix this. Those sharp kids, oh, no problem. It's this instead. They'll get it. The average kids, you have to say it a few times to reprogram them. They'll get it. But the slower kids, they're going to struggle. So, it's all goes back to, why am I teaching? How am I going to do this to the best of my ability? Be prepared. I remember one time I was subbing and I was teaching 6th grade math for somebody who was out for a while, and it fell onto my lot to teach casting out nines. To this day, I do not understand, and I do not even consider looking at casting out nines. So I was being the good teacher. The day before, I was looking at it. I was thinking, what is this? I went to the office. The lady in there was really good. I said, can you help me with this? I don't understand this at all. Oh, this is easy. I missed it. Could you show me again? Yeah. One more time. She worked with me for a while. I think I got it. Let me do one by myself. I got it. In front of her, I got it. I thought, okay, I'm going to be good. So I went home. I did it one more time before I went to bed, just to make sure I had it. I felt good about going into the class next day. These are 5th and 6th graders, not kindergartners, not 1st graders. I get up in front. I have my problems on the board. I teach them about casting out nines. Let me show you what I mean. I got up to the board and I didn't get 2 steps into it. And I had myself so confused. And I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this? And with the right attitude, I had a 6th grader raise his hand. And he said, "Ma'am, do you mean..." And I looked at him, I went, "Danny, you caught it. I was just waiting to see who was going to catch what I was messing up for you so that you would do it right. And since you did, you get to come and show the class that you understand what I mean. Come on." And I stood back and I let him teach casting out nines. I really thought I was prepared, and I wasn't, okay? But we need to do the best job at getting ourselves prepared. And I know when you get into the ministry, it gets busy. College is busy, isn't it? But it's a controlled busy. You have teachers over you that you could go to those teachers and say, "I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me?" When you get out in the ministry, you are the one people are going to be coming to. And so you add on to that plate, and then you add on the ministries in church they give you, and then you add on a family, and you add on, and you are extremely busy in a different way. And so you have to make sure you cannot go into that classroom on the fly. You have to be prepared. It's imperative. Don't forget, God has put you in charge of these children, and you are going to be held accountable. You're going to stand before Him, and He's going to say, "So you slept until 7:30 that day, and because of that, look what happened to this child." You know, some, depending on which age you are teaching, some kids are on the brink. They could go either way, and you might be the one that pulls them to the right side. You say, "Mrs. Rader, you are just making this so heavy." Well, it is. Because when I stand before God, I want Him to look at me and say, "Well done." It's not just in our church ministry, it's everything He's given you to do. Do it right the first time. Okay? So, the first thing involved in reading is giving them the tools. What would you consider the tools to learn to read? It's very simple. Come on, somebody speak. Amanda, help me out. A book, but how can they read that book? I haven't given them the tools to read that book yet. What's a tool? Come on. It's not that early right now. You just did it today. Olivia? Go even lower. The letters. I have to begin at the very, very beginning. Very good. Okay, you say, I don't think God's called me to teach little kids. Do you know? People always say, "Oh, it's just kindergarten. You have it so easy." Do you know the hardest thing about teaching young children? Getting down to their level. Because it's so common to us. We can't understand how they can't understand it. In class the other day, I had to, first grade, this is first grade, not kindergarten, I had my kids fold their paper in half. And so I did it the easy way. This is kind of hard, so I said, turn your paper longwise. Now, fold that paper up until it meets itself. And then take your finger and crease it. All but one. I don't even know how he folded his paper. It was so weird. I just looked at him and said, Luke, did you follow instructions? Ma'am, yes. No, let's try this again. I can't comprehend how he couldn't just follow my simple direction as I was doing it with them. Evidently, I wasn't low enough. Okay? The hardest thing about teaching young children is getting down to that level for them so that you're not speaking over their head. And every single age group that you're going to teach, you have to find their level that they're on and make sure you come down to that level to give them the tools. And learning to read, the tool is the base level. The very first thing, I teach them what the letters are and I teach them their sounds. You have to have that starting point. Okay, so we give them the tools. The second thing involved in reading is comprehension. Okay, so think a few weeks ahead here. We're going to be having a test. There are certain things that just stick out to me that would make a wonderful listing question. And I'm going to give you 7 things that is involved in reading. So you just might want to put an L or something there to remind you this is probably going to be a listing question. The first test is always the hardest because you don't know how the teacher. Comprehension. What is comprehension? Very simply put, comprehension is understanding what you read. So if I'm going to teach the children to read and I'm going to do a very good job with it, I'm going to give them the tools, pull them along. I'm going to give them the comprehension skills that they need. I'm going to help them to understand what they're reading. Okay? So I give them the tools. I help them to comprehend. Oral reading is an integral part of learning to read. Oral reading is reading out loud. Oral reading is a must, especially with young children. That's how I'm going to find out. Oh, wait, I'm going to get ahead of myself. All right, so oral reading. I have some things about that. The first thing I think of when I think of oral reading, it keeps the child from fooling himself. Oral reading, reading out loud. He's reading to me. He can't get that word. He's going to know, I can't understand this. Sometimes I'll have the students sit at their desk and I'll say, okay, open up your book and I want you to read this page to yourself. And then in reading, if they get done with some seat work, I'll say, get your reading book out and just read it. Well, that's silent reading, no noise. And they'll fly through that in about 30 seconds. They close their book. I'll say, what are you doing? Liam, you're supposed to be reading. Ma'am, I'm done. Oh, wow, that was fast. You did a good job, maybe? Let's find out. We get to the oral reading. Liam, you read that page. Stand up and read it for the class. John. When you have them read out loud, they can't say I'm doing a good job because they're hearing what they're actually doing. Okay? It keeps them from fooling themselves. The second thing under oral reading is it teaches them to read fluently and with good expression. Because they're reading to me and they're reading like this all the time. And I stop them and I say, wow, you got every word correctly. Good job with that. But wow, is that the way you talk? Ma'am, no. Do you talk like this? Ma'am, no. Well, let's not read that way either. We want to read like we talk. And we help them with that. And the only way I can really know if they're reading fluently or if they're reading with good expression is to have them read out loud. So reading out loud, many teachers say, oh, I just ran out of time and I didn't have time for that. That is a main thing for your reading class. Don't skip that. There are certain things that teachers have to combine together and say, ooh, we don't have time for this today. Don't skip oral reading, okay? But there are different types of oral reading that you can do, all right? So there's 3 different types of oral reading. This is underneath. Capital letter C, if that's what you have. Underneath is 3 types of reading. The first one is called individual reading. Very simply, that's just I have them come to my desk. I do that a lot with Sequoia. You all know Sequoia? She needs lots of help. So I have her read with my class, but anytime I have a little extra time, Sequoia, come read individually. Come read to me at my desk. That's individual. I can do a lot one-on-one. When I have them read out loud for me, I take note of what I see they're struggling with, and then I do some one-on-one with them to help them overcome that. The second type is in small groups. That's called reading circles. Now, for the life of me, I do not know why it's called reading circle because it's only ever a half circle, if that. But we just say, okay, it's time for reading circles. And I have chairs sit in a half circle facing me, and I pick out of my 10 students, I have them grouped. I have the fast readers, the average readers, and the slow readers. I do not want to have a whole group reading with first graders because while Diana is reading dictionaries and encyclopedias, and I looked at her and I went, seriously? She likes reading out of the dictionary. I have Sequoia who needs help. And so I say, okay, these 3 or 4 kids are very good readers. I'm going to put them in this group and I'm going to take them as fast as I can. I'm going to have them go. This is an average group. This is my main part of my class. I'm going to keep them right on. This is my slow group. My goal for this group is to get them up to be average readers, okay? So I can't have a slow reader with my fast reader because they're going to slow everything down. So I put them in groups, put according to their abilities. All right, so small group reading circles is I put them in groups according to their abilities, and then I have just certain kids read at a time. Well, what do I do with the rest of my class? Well, I'm having 4 children come read to me. The rest of the kids are going to do seat work. I give them busy work to do. All right, you know what I like about that? I'm working with a small group. I can get places with them. But I'm also teaching the rest of my class individual work time. They're having to work on their own. Many first graders, many kindergartners, they can't do anything on their own. I'll say, all right, class, you're going to circle the right letters. The pictures are there. Look at the letters. Whichever one is the beginning sound, circle it. Go ahead and get started. Liam, what are you doing? Mama, I don't know what to do. Let's try this again. Okay, Liam, here's what we're going to do. You look at the pictures. You do this. You circle the right one. Get started. Liam, what's wrong? I don't know what this picture is. Okay? Some kids are insecure and they think that the teacher has to be right there. Well, you know, it might take a little while, but Liam does great in my class now. We read the instructions, he gets busy. That's what I like about reading circles. It's giving me time to build a well-rounded student. I'm working actually on 2 different things at the same time. Okay? So individual groups. Something else I want to mention about having individual reading groups. I know that the students are going to know what group they're in, but don't call them, you're reading group 1, you're reading group 2, you're reading group 3. Okay? So one of my kids came home from school and I said, oh, you start reading groups today? Yes. What group are you in? The slow one. What? What's your group name? We're the Tigers. Oh, neat. Why do you say the slow one? Because I'm not in so-and-so's group and he reads fast, and I'm not in so-and-so's group because they read fast. I'm in the slow group. They will know, but you can still make it interesting and fun for them. All right, so this year in my reading circles, we are rockets. We're the green rockets, the red rockets, the blue rockets, and then I have the solar system up on the board with stars there, and for every book they read, the rocket moves across the solar system, and so they'll see progress. Last year or the year before, I did monkeys in baskets. They really liked that. You've done all kinds of things, birds. Sometimes if my class is majority boys, I'll do sports. You're going to be the pro football players, you're the basketball players, you're the baseball players. They love it. I remember Melody Schreiber, the class that she was in, she was the only girl. It was the very first year that Schreibers came. She was in kindergarten. She sat down and she looked at the stuff. I had a color sheet set out on the page for them, and I said, all right, boys and girls, get down. You can start coloring your page while we're waiting for a class to read. She looks at me, she says, I already know how to color. I'm the best colorer in the world. I went, whoa, okay, well, why don't you sit down and show me? One girl in a class full of boys. You know what my first theme was? Football. So I walked up to Mr. Schreiber. I said, I just want to prepare you that I have an all-boys class, so we're going to treat Melody like a princess, but she's going to be doing a lot of sports stuff this year. So you know what I did? I made a football field. I had the lines there, and I had all my kids be footballs, but Melody's football was pink. So I kept her a girly football player, okay? You can do things that are going to interest your students, okay? So think about your class while you're trying to figure out what you want to do. Think about the students, okay? But don't do your group 1, your group 2, your group 3, okay? Then the third type of reading, I said there's individual reading, there's reading circles or in small groups, and then there's whole class reading. What would that be? We pick up the Bible and we read a passage as a class. Class stand. Let's read John 3, 16 through 18. Begin. John 3, 16 through 18. For God so. That's whole class reading. Poetry is another type of whole class reading. They get their readers, their spelling books out, turn to the back poetry section. Let's read our poem, class. They read their poem as a whole in unison. 3 types of reading, okay? Could you please just underline there? There's 3 types of oral reading. Underline that so your mind will catch that, because a lot of students mess that up when I talk about types of silent reading you do, okay? Okay, so Bible and poetry reading is whole class reading. Okay, so what does reading involve? It involves giving them the tools, starting them off at the basics. It involves teaching them comprehension. It involves oral reading. And the 4th thing is it involves what I call reading rate. Reading rate. I'm just going to give you 2 statements underneath of it to help you to understand what I mean by reading rate. Okay? Reading rate is this. Write this down. The faster they read, the better they read. It's a very simple thought. I want them to take the rate of slowly sounding out words and coming up with a word to speeding up to a nice flowing pace. Don't say pace, rate. Okay? So the faster they read, the better they read. The second thing is the faster they read, the better they concentrate. I've had reading circles. Okay, so I have fast readers, I have slow readers. So I get in the reading circles and I have those fast kids reading and da la 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 la. I ask questions about it and they all get it. No problems. Why? Because their reading rate was at such a nice rate that they could concentrate on what they were saying. But you take a slower group and they read the sentence, the dog ran home, and they get the real fast because we know sight word, T-H-E spells the dog, good, keep going faster, ran, and by the time they get to the end of the sentence, they've forgotten what the whole sentence said. Why? They're reading slowly. Okay? So reading rate is your job is to get them to read as quickly as possible. And very seldom, but every once in a while, I have to tell someone, slow down. I can't understand what you're reading. Oh, we were reading out of the handbook for reading yesterday, and I had them just read a whole row across. And the first child that read it had a real nice hop, tub, pan. I was like, wow, that was so nice. That was fast. Well, haven't had to say yet, don't read too fast, okay? I've been saying, try to read faster, faster, keep going. But they read it quickly and I praised them. You remember the Bible verse, a word fitly spoken in due season, how good it is? I praised, and boy, that changed the rest of the class. So much so that the next person that read, I couldn't even understand what they said because they read them so fast. I went, ooh, well, why don't you slow down a little bit and read that again, because I'm sure some of those kids missed those words. But they read fast. You don't want it too fast. It needs to be a nice, comfortable. The faster they read, though, the better they'll read, it will flow, and the better they'll concentrate. That's what reading rate is. The next thing is pacing. You've got to keep those two separate. Pacing is a thought, okay? You need to think it through. Right behind pacing, write this, though. It is determined by the content of the material they're reading. So, I love horse stories. I love reading horse stories. It does not take me very long to read a book, and it can be this thick if it's a good story. Okay? I like mysteries too. I get into them. How many of you get into that good mystery and you just can't stand the thought of not knowing whether that person's going to end up dying or not, so you skip to almost the end just to see if their name's mentioned to make sure they're still alive? Okay? You can really get into a good book. You find what you like, and you can sit for hours. I cannot say, I'm just going to read one chapter before I go to bed. That doesn't work. But I promise you, girls, when I was in History of Civilization, I never took that book to bed with me and said, I'm just going to read for 3 hours. History of Civilization. No. Why? That is not my content. All right? Pacing is determined by what content of the material you're reading. All right, so if I have a good book, a fun book, I fly through it. I read it as fast as I can. If I'm reading a book that I'm going to be quizzed over, I'm reading that section, and this was to my detriment because I would read a couple sentences and I'd say, oh, I don't know what I read. I gotta go back and read that again. And it took me hours just to get through 3 pages of reading because I was studying and memorizing it while I was reading. You need to slow down, but not too much, all right? So look at this. If it's fiction or if it's recreational, they read faster, okay? And I want them to read faster. But if it's science or history or something that they're going to be tested over, they read slower to think it through. That is what pacing is. And my first graders really don't have to worry about pacing. But by the time they get to the second, third, fourth grade, they're taking their history books home. They have a quiz over it the next day. Pacing comes into play. Now this is teaching reading, teaching elementary reading. So we are teaching from the kindergarten up through the 6th grade. So I have to mention pacing because by the time 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, they are really having to think through, how fast can I read this and still know what I'm going to be quizzed over? They have to determine it, okay? So pacing is important if I'm going to teach them to read properly. The next thing is understanding the differences in children. Kind of feel like it shouldn't be here, but it is a real important part in what I do with my children, my students. All right, so I have to understand that all the children are different. Okay? So a few things underneath of this. The first thing is this. There are different reading abilities, likes, and character traits of my children. So when I'm getting my reading material, you know what, if I see a child who's really struggling with being lazy, wow, I can add a book into that reading time that teaches the character trait of not being lazy. And so my curriculum does a really good job with it, but I as a teacher can say, okay, for reading today, we're going to read out of this book. Because you know what? I need to get through my curriculum material, but I also am trying to help my students. And so what you do, the different promotions and motivational ideas you do, you have to keep this in mind. You know, a motivational board for reading is a wonderful thing. One time I had a reading tree and I said, you know what? I want to see you boys and girls reading more than just what you have to read. So every book you read at home, if your mom will write me a note, I've got these little books and little animals holding the books. We'll put you in our reading tree and we'll put your name and the name of the book on it. And that was such a big motivation. I actually used it at the same time we were doing the Book It program because they had to do outside reading anyhow. So it was a good thing. Well, okay, you can do that, or you can do, let's say I go back to my whole class of boys. Do a baseball theme, or do a sports theme, or something that you know they're going to like. Okay, you cannot do an all-class special motivational reading thing with ballerinas if you've got 3/4 boys in your class. I wouldn't even do it if you had any boys in your class, because no boy is going to want to be a ballerina. Okay? So you have to think it through. But if you have a reading circle that's all girls, go for the girly things. You know, girls love girly things, but girls also love boy sports things. They love the sports cars. They love any boy theme I've ever done. The girls have gotten into it too. So you've got different likes and abilities and character traits. You have to think all of that through while you're doing your reading. So this next thing, I said it already, you'll want to gear your class more towards boys, because it's really easy to pull the girls into some boy activities, but you definitely can't do that for the girly things. Another thing under understanding your differences in your children is you need to make it interesting and exciting. You can't just say, my curriculum says this, I'm doing that, and we're done. If they get it, great. If they don't, great. No, that's not what your job is. Your job is to make sure every student grows and matures and learns to the best of their ability. And your job is to pull them along. Find ways. Okay? Okay, so I have something in my class. Okay, I hated history. I think it was that I was in the public school and none of the great men in history that I've learned about since leaving the public school was ever talked about in the public school. Okay, they've rewritten the history books. I hated history. I didn't like learning dates. I didn't like, you ask me today, what war was this? When was this war? I'll have to look that up. I can't keep my wars separate. I hate history, sorry. But when I was teaching in the 5th and 6th grade for a while, my students didn't know I hated history. My students thought that history was the greatest thing in the world. Why? I lied to them. No. For them it could be. Because what the teacher likes, the students a lot of times will like. And if I get up there and say, all right, it's history time. Open your books, I hate history. Let's read this and find out what we get to learn about what happened. You know what you're going to have the students do? Oh, it's history time. That's not what you want. You want them to love everything. And every student is not going to love everything. But your attitude will help them to like it. Okay? And if you think about it, history is God's story. His story. And history does repeat itself. I wish that I had a good teacher when I was growing up. And I wish I would have learned it. My girls love history. I'm glad. You want your students to love the classes too. Because if you teach them young to love what they're learning about it, when it gets hard later on, they'll still like it. It'll be doable for them, okay? And they'll learn more. So you make it interesting and exciting. And then number 4 underneath this, understanding your differences, I have in capital letters, you. Y-O-U. You influence the children. That's just what I said about the history example. You know, every year is a new beginning for them. And every year, just like you're looking at the students, you've already talked to last year's teacher and you know the troublemakers, okay? And you're sizing them up when they come into your classroom. Guess what? They're sizing you up too. Do you know every student that goes into Mrs. Hady's classroom is petrified of her? Why? Mrs. Hady's so hard. But you know, it only takes them a couple weeks and Mrs. Hady is their favorite teacher. Why? She's a good teacher, okay? She's fair. It's a new start every year. You know, if you have a class come in, why, but through the years, one name pops up. Every time I talk about troubled students, one name. But you know what? I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to forget that part of him. A new class comes in. You've talked to the teacher and you've heard this little boy is a terror. Those kids come in excited. They've been told by their parents, you know what, your 575 demerits from last year are gone. It's a new start. You're starting the year with 0. And the student says, it is a new year. Maybe I can do better this year. He walks into the classroom. All right, boys and girls, put your things up, get your lunches up, get your books out, put them in your desk, and let's get our year started. You right there, I see you. I heard all about you last year. Right here, buddy. You're under my nose because we're not having a repeat of last year. You just ruined it. You ruined it. Do you know what that kid thinks? she already hates me. She already is treating me like I'm a troublemaker. I'm going to give her a run for her money. You blew it as a teacher. Every single child that comes into your room the first day has their level. And you try to keep them level. And you try to keep them all on that same page. And you try to keep that page clean. The longer you can do that, the better you're going to have. You know what? Janelle Patinia. I heard that she was a terror. When she got into my class, she was the best little thing. She is a good girl until you cross her. Aren't we all like that? We all have our stubbornnesses. So you learn and you deal. And you know what? Janelle's doing great in school. She's doing well. Why? Because the different teachers gave her a start, a fresh start. And you make sure you do that each class that you have. You give those students, every single one, a fresh start. Don't play favorites and don't brand your children, okay? You will influence them. I promise you, girls, if you love and you care for your students, no matter how hard you have to be sometime with them, they know you love them. And that in itself will help them to respect you and listen to you. You can deal out the harshest punishment in love, and they'll accept it because they know you care about them. Okay, so you influence your students. Don't blow it. And that's where it comes back to, you start the day with God, you led by God, He'll show you how to deal with the students. The Holy Spirit will guide you. Okay? So, this is a funny one underneath understanding the differences. You want to build their egos. And I promise you, there are some students you do not have to build their egos. I've had students in my class that will do things and they'll say, "Ma'am, look at my work." And I have literally said, "Oh, bring that here and let me see." And you could just see the pride in their face, like, "I am the best one." And so they bring it up and I'll say, "Oh yeah, look at that. I really can't tell what it is. What is it?" And you just see their face go, "Oh, what? Ma'am, that's my car I made." "Oh yeah, okay, I see that." "Oh yeah, look at that coloring. It went out the lines there." That's very seldom that I do that, but there are every once in a while you've got a child who just thinks he's the cat's meow. I have a name coming through my mind with that one too. And some of you know him. Okay, sometimes you have to knock them down a little bit, but for the majority of the time, you are building those students up. You've got those timid kids that come into your classroom. They'll sit here and they'll never raise their hand. They'll never talk. You want to build them up. And you can do that in reading, okay? A word fitly spoken in due season, how good it is. It builds your students. Use that. The next thing underneath your differences in children, you want to get your parents involved. It will make it go so much more smoothly if you get those parents involved. Communication is a key to teaching the students. Communication with the parents. Because what they learn with you in school, they go home and do. And many, many parents, although they work all day and they come home and they don't feel like sitting down and doing homework, they know that's their job and they want to do it. So you communicate with them. There's many, many times that I've got kids in the lower group and I'll say, "You know, they're really a little bit behind. Could you just work every day for 5 minutes on their vowel sounds? Just 5 minutes. If you do that, they're going to catch up." Parents want to do that, but the communication has to be there. Okay? So communicating with your parents is a key. And then the last thing underneath the abilities, I kind of said it already, but you want to teach them honesty and character. You want to teach them to work hard. And you do that through reading and the types of reading you give them. All right? So think about this. You train them while they're little, right now, what you want them to be when they grow up. You can't say, "Well, later on they can learn how to work hard later on." No. You are trying to build well-rounded students at the level that you're teaching. And so it takes different things. And you want to work on all character traits, all things, all year. Okay? Building well-rounded students. I'm going to stop right there because I have one more minute. And the next section is the longest section. So we've talked about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. 6 things that's involved in reading. On Monday, we'll talk about the last thing, and that's the nitty-gritty thing. Phonics is an integral part of teaching a child to learn to read. Teaching them phonics. It's the best way. Okay, so we'll talk about that on Monday.